The Lost World's main conflict takes place on Isla Sorna and is between two separate teams who arrive on the island to do vastly different things. On one corner we have the Gatherer side, whose main purpose is to obtain a complete photo record of the living dinosaurs to be shown to the public in order to organize the island into a biological preserve, and keep Hammond's animals and the world's human population safe from any further altercations. The Hunter side is a group composed of big game hunters themselves, but also various mercenaries and the odd paleontologist. Their mission is to capture the dinosaurs and bring them back to a theme park already constructed in San Diego in order to bail InGen out of their debts from Jurassic Park and save the company from going under. Now, some detractors of the second Jurassic Park film have brought up their argument that the film should have had Nick Van Owen to be the one character portrayed as a villain due to his actions taking against the Hunter group, which got many of them killed or injured. This particular discussion won't be brought up only for this singular video and will be a point I go into further detail in a video I've been scripting for a while now. The Critiquing Criticisms video for The Lost World is going to happen, and this is going to be an interesting part of it. Before we even begin, I think it's important to examine the ethics of both teams and go from there. The Hunter's introduction in The Lost World is an extended sequence detailing their tranquilizing and rough capture of many of the exotic dinosaurs running free of the island. The methods this group uses in order to contain these animals is questionable at best and downright abusive at worst. One character in particular becomes Van Owen's opposite on the Hunter team when he chooses to zap a Compsognathus with a cattle prod for no other reason than what seems to be boredom. Dieter Stark is also the man responsible for the capturing of most of these dinosaurs earlier in the film when Roland left him in charge of such operations, and his tactics aren't the most empathetic to the creatures, to say the least. Van Owen comes from a very different background. While his character was originally introduced as a video documentarian, it's revealed after the roundup scene that he is in fact an environmentalist that has worked for Greenpeace and Earth First. He was actually sent specifically by John Hammond to throw a wrench in Peter Ludlow's plans of bringing the dinosaurs off of the island, and as such does exactly what he's hired to do. Van Owen sets many of the dinosaurs free in the InGen camp, leading to the destruction of all of the Hunter's equipment, and this eventually leads to the confrontation between the two sides after the trailers are pushed over the cliff by the Tyrannosaurs. It's important to note that at this point in The Lost World, every single one of the Hunters is portrayed as being a collective, antagonizing force that is preventing Malcolm's team from making sure the island is kept preserved, and no human harm can come to anyone like what had transpired in Jurassic Park. Now we are given more development for a character we met earlier, Roland Tembo. This is the one character that is given heroic traits on the opposing side, and as such, one the audience is meant to take a liking to. Roland is written far different from the greedy Ludlow, the cowardly Burke, or the overly violent Dieter. In fact, it is Roland's hand to reach down and save the gatherers who were hanging by the side of the cliff, and it's his compassion towards the other group that would eventually lead what would be left of the teams to safety. Now here's where the argument begins. Nick Van Owen deliberately decides to take the shells out of Roland's double-barreled rifle in an effort to prevent the big game hunter from killing a Tyrannosaurus. This is done purposefully by the environmentalists due to his disapproval of anyone killing a dinosaur, which has just been brought back to life after millions of years only to be shot for sport. However, when the Tyrannosaurs descend onto the InGen camp that night, Roland raises his gun to the brain of the female Rex and squeezes the trigger only to find his weapon had been sabotaged. The criticism presents itself here as Nick Van Owen being the man directly responsible for all of the deaths that happen on Isla Sorna and everyone that gets hurt in San Diego, because he emptied Roland's gun and sabotaged InGen's camp. Do these acts make Nick Van Owen a villain? To put it bluntly, no. Earlier I mentioned that Roland is the one character on the Hunter's side to be presented with commendable traits. He makes sure Kelly is unaware of Dieter's death and goes out of his way to save the camp despite the fact that all of his men have deserted it and fend for themselves. Every single other Hunter, mercenary, and man employed by InGen, with the obvious exception of Roland's hunting partner Ajay Sidhu, who was cut down considerably in the theatrical release of the film, is introduced, portrayed, and shown to exhibit zero sympathy from the audience, and each one of them is painted in a villainous light in earlier scenes, like the aforementioned roundup sequence, and the very scene we're talking about where the Rexes attack the camp, with several of them shoving Ian Malcolm to the ground and running past him in order to save themselves. The one man we are made to feel a connection with and show an interest for is Roland himself. This is where I believe the emotions take over rationality in these scenes. The Lost World sets Roland up as an incredibly interesting big game hunter that shows leadership, compassion, and superiority in every action he takes in the film. And Nick Van Owen's Sabotage is viewed negatively to some audience members due to their sheer adoration and admiring of Roland's character. Nobody gave a shit about any of the other InGen guys, but no one wanted to see Roland die. Van Owen is interestingly not shown in any scenes of the film where his survival is a concern to the audience. Even when the trailers are going over the cliff, our focus is aimed primarily at the struggle to prevent Sarah from falling to her death on the sharp rocks, while Nick and Ian try to prevent the backsheet of glass from breaking. Nick is shown repeatedly saving the members on his side and going out of his way to oppose the hunters, despite the shortcomings the gatherers find themselves in each situation. Now, some say that Nick is an asshole who has no respect for any of the hunters' lives, and you're 100% correct. In the scene where Burke throws himself into the waterfall and pushes past Sarah and Kelly, trying to save himself and give no care to the others, Nick can audibly be heard calling him a son of a bitch and to let the dinosaur eat him. Nick is there for one reason: to prevent the dinosaurs from being exploited and getting off of the island. This is because of Hammond's lesson learned in Jurassic Park, being that the control of these creatures cannot be achieved, and that he cannot and will not let them be used as assets or cause innocent civilians to be harmed for his nephew's personal business goals being achieved. Nick Van Owen and Roland Tembo's rivalry is just the surface of what is essentially a corporate civil war inside of InGen between Ludlow's attempted revival of Jurassic Park and Hammond's refusal to let that happen. This rivalry is detailed further in the origins of Roland and Van Owen's characters. Both characters' names were taken from the folk song Roland the Headless Thompson Gunner. I'll link to it in the description if you'd like to check it out. In the song, Roland and Van Owen are hired to participate in the African Bush Wars and fight alongside each other and other mercenaries. Eventually, the CIA takes notice of Roland as being the greatest Thompson gunner there is and hires Van Owen to betray him. Van Owen kills Roland, but the Thompson gunner comes back from the grave to exact his revenge and eventually finds Van Owen in a Mombassan bar before killing him and getting his vengeance on the mercenary who did him in. To call Van Owen the real villain of the Lost World is to avoid rational thought and become subjective to only one's emotional attachment to Roland himself. Now, the value of human life is one of the most important things on this planet, and any decent human being would agree that the murder of someone they disagree with is fundamentally wrong. However, no human being on the hunter's side of the Lost World is portrayed as being a, quote, good guy, and in reality, neither is Van Owen. The gray areas of right and wrong are examined and challenged routinely in the second Jurassic Park, and it's one of the reasons I think some people have taken a disliking to it. To say the film is wrong to prop Van Owen up as some hero, despite the movie not really doing so, and to call him a murderer of the InGen team, is really illogical in the sense of actual evidence and reason. Van Owen didn't go out of his way to kill every single InGen mercenary, and if he in fact had, why wouldn't he just slit their throats while they slept in the camp that night, or take their guns for himself and shoot them? Now, the long consequential actions of Van Owen emptying Roland's gun eventually leads to the man taking charge and tranking the buck Rex, which causes havoc in San Diego. But saying it's all Nick's fault, everyone died and people got attacked in San Diego, are directly a result because of his emptying of one man's gun? That's ludicrous. Roland wasn't the only character with a weapon in the Lost World, and several hunters are visibly shown shooting the Tyrannosaurs with Spaz 12s and HKs during the attack on the camp. Remember, Van Owen is attempting to stop the hunters at all costs and is opposing a force of men that have been presented as antagonists. The reason people care so deeply about the emptying of Roland's gun is because it's Roland himself. The audience is meant to love Roland. Now, because Roland has no bullets, this does in fact lead to the man tranquilizing the dinosaur and bringing it back to San Diego, which does mean that it happened because of Van Owen's sabotage of Roland's rifle. But does that make Van Owen an evil, mustache-twirling villain? The irony of this scene is played accordingly, and the gray areas of hero and villain are presented on full to the viewer. Nick Van Owen is no more of a villain than Roland Tembo is a hero. Here are two men on opposing sides who share vastly different views on this island that come into conflict with one another in the corporate civil war InGen is undergoing. Yes, Van Owen did empty Roland's gun, and yes, Roland was forced to shoot the Rex with a tranquilizer. But why does that have to lead to the illogical statement that Nick Van Owen is a villain? He's responsible for the San Diego incident in some regard, yes, but not entirely. This logic is the same as saying Robert Muldoon is the villain of the first Jurassic Park. If it sounds far-fetched, that's because it's so similar to this argument. Isn't Muldoon supposed to be an expert on raptor behavior? Isn't he supposed to be the man in charge of security of Jurassic Park? Then why does he load a raptor in a metal box on a forklift and drive it through trees where it's slapped by branches, bounces up and down, and dropped on the concrete before it starts getting slid into a small cage with some idiot climbing onto the box and lifting the gate? Of course the raptor's going to charge the fuck out of there, and this leads directly to Joffrey getting killed, and subsequently all the visitors being brought in to sign off in the park and make sure it's safe. So Muldoon is responsible for Joffrey's death, Nedry's death, Arnold's death, and his own death. Do you understand how ridiculously insane an analogy like this is? So Van Owen emptied Roland's gun, the hunters ran away and were eaten by various different dinosaurs, and Roland took charge as usual and tranquilized the Tyrannosaur, leading to the San Diego incident. A series of events shown to be both ironic and consequential of one another. Why does this make Nick a villain? In truth, it doesn't. The hate and disdain that Nick earns in The Lost World is directly attributed to the love and admiration that Roland is given in the same film. Stating the movie makes us go out of our way to love Nick isn't true at all, and while the villains of the film were attacked by the Rex as well as the residents of San Diego, this can't all be pinned on one man's faults for the sake of disdain for a film, and it isn't really a valid argument. In truth, the argument was over after its initial presentation, as it's always stated as Nick Van Owen should have been the villain of The Lost World. Now, what a film should have done is a suggestion, and not something that the film did do. If objective criticism finds a fault within a film, then it must be validated through factual evidence and logical reasoning. This argument lacks both. A villain is someone who does evil things. A hero is someone who does selfless things. Roland is somewhat selfless in being the only hunter to retaliate against the Rex, but it's because of his personal goal of obtaining his trophy. Van Owen is never portrayed once as doing anything selfish in the entire film. Even his sabotage of Roland's weapon is done because of his sympathy shown towards the life of the Rex. Now, I don't personally agree with the behavior it exhibited in the film, please do not get that twisted, but in the end, that doesn't matter. A fault can only be found if it can be validated. Nick took out Roland's shells, and Roland tranked the buck. What more is there to debate? Saying he's responsible for the deaths of the mercenaries and the civilians in San Diego is not an argument because it wasn't intentional. The mercenaries had their own guns. Roland was just one man, a man written differently than the rest. Is there a fault within the movie because Van Owen emptied Roland's gun? Did the movie do something that made no sense in this exact scene? Was any of this irrational or illogical? No. Why wouldn't Van Owen empty Roland's weapon the second he had the chance? Any other merc could have killed both Tyrannosaurs, and Van Owen had no intention of forcing Roland to trank the Rex, or even have reason to believe he would do so. In the end, Nick is hated because Roland is loved. Now, is that a fault within the film? Wow, that was way longer than I had hoped it would be. As always, thank you for taking the time to watch this video, guys, and I really appreciate all of your continued support, regardless if you hate Nick Van Owen or not. And thank you for sticking to the end. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions down below, and hope you consider subscribing if you haven't already. And I want to make it abundantly clear that I am not attacking anyone's opinions on The Lost World. If you hate a movie, that's totally fine, and I respect your opinion on that. But disliking something subjectively and finding real faults that are objective are two different things, and this is the main reason I'm making the critiquing criticisms video on this particular film. I myself dislike Avatar. I don't like it at all, but I acknowledge that it's a good movie. I'd recommend it to people because it's a good movie, but I don't subjectively like it, oddly enough, because it's like Van Owen times a million. Again, thank you for all of your support. It really means a lot. I know some of you probably will disagree with me on this, and I welcome reason and evidence, and I hope you leave it down below. I'll see you in the next video, guys, and as always, take it easy.